Okay, welcome everybody. It's a wonderful story I want to share with you this morning. Just to give you a little context about the story, it comes from 13th century China, Japan, Zen Master Dogen. Last year at the end, let's see. Yeah, here it is. Dogen Zenji says, in the 5th month of the 16th year of the Kate period, so it's June or July of 1223. Dogen's about 23 years old. He's mid-20s here. And he just made a long journey from what today would take, I don't know, maybe a couple hours. He took a long journey from Japan to China. In those days, they didn't have airplanes. They didn't have subways. They didn't have buses. They didn't have cars. So he takes a long journey with his teacher, Myozen, so he was a Rinzai Zen monk at this time. And he takes a long, arduous journey from Japan to China. Maybe took several weeks to do that. And he says, I was on my ship at, you're going to have to excuse my pronunciation, Qingyuan. While I was talking with the Japanese captain, an old monk arrived who looked about 60 years old. All right, so Dogen is at port. What's that?
I said, hey, you said old monk at 60?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so he's at port. He hasn't left his boat yet. So that gives you a sense of immigration in those days. Similar to today in some ways. You can't just enter a country that's not your own without some kind of passport. And Dogen was waiting for his papers to arrive at this time. So he had to wait on the ship. And there was a Japanese captain, of course, because he didn't know presumably how to navigate a ship by himself. He had help. So this old monk arrived who looked about 60 years old. He came straight onto the boat and asked one of the crew if he could buy some Japanese shiitake mushrooms. I invited him to drink some tea and asked him where he lived. He was the Tenzo at the monastery at Ayuang Mountain. He was the Tenzo. He said, I am from the western part of Sichuan and left home 40 years ago. In other words, he became a monk, so probably around age 20. Not much younger than Dogen's age at the time of this particular meeting. This year I am 61 years old. I have spent time at many monasteries in various areas. In recent years, I stayed with Guyun Dao Xuan. Then I went to practice at Ayuang Monastery, where I have been kept very busy. Didn't you come to zazen to be busy? Last year, after the end of the summer practice period, I was appointed Tenzo of the temple. So the Tenzo is the head cook. Tomorrow is the 5th day celebration. I do not have any special food to serve. I want to make noodle soup, but I do not have any mushrooms. Therefore, I came here to try to buy shiitake to offer the monks from the 10 directions. Dogen, now the conversation gets a little bit deeper. I asked him, this is Dogen talking, I asked him, what time did you depart from here? The Tenzo said, after lunch. I said, how far distant from here is Ayuang? Listen to this. The Tenzo said 32 or 35 li, which is about 12 miles. He didn't have a car, folks. He didn't have a motorcycle. He didn't have a bicycle. He He didn't have a bus. He walked 12 miles after lunch. I said, when are you going to return to the temple? The Tenzo said, as soon as I finish buying the mushrooms, I will go. Wow. Let's get into this in a little bit here, but this is just already amazing to me. I said, today, unexpectedly, we have met and also had a conversation on this ship. Is this not a truly fortunate opportunity? Allow Dogen to offer food to you, Tenzo Zenji. So here's Dogen. We don't know how long he's been waiting. He's been on a boat. He traveled for several weeks to get to China. We don't know how long he's been on this boat waiting to get his papers to come through so he can leave. And now a monk, the person that he wants to meet, comes to him. Wow, what a fortunate experience for Dogen. You got to remember the context here. Why is Dogen going to China in the first place? It's because of the corruption of Buddhism in Japan. It's been there for about 600 years or so, and he knew something was not quite right, but couldn't quite point to it. So he and his teacher decided to go together to China. And his teacher, actually, his papers came through earlier than Dogen. So he left. He left Dogen on the ship. So here's this Chinese monk now he meets for the first time. And it happens to be none other than a cook for the monastery, Ayuang, for the temple. The Tenzo said, it is not possible. If I do not take care of tomorrow's offering, it will be done badly. I said, in your temple, aren't there some workers who know how to prepare meals the same as you? If only one person, the Tenzo, is not there, will something be deficient? The Tenzo said, during my old age, I am handling this job. So in senility, I am doing this wholehearted practice. There's a key for you. I am doing this wholehearted practice. How could I possibly just give away my responsibilities? Also, when I came here, here's another thing, I did not ask permission to stay away overnight. Okay, that's the second point. I then asked the Tenzo, Venerable Tenzo, in your advanced years, why do you not wholeheartedly engage the way through zazen or penetrate the words and stories of the ancient masters, the koan stories, instead of troubling yourself by being Tenzo and just working? Man, he's set himself up for major admonishment.
Dharma.
And then he further asks, what is that good for? Wow, what is that good for? So Dogen is totally admitting his own ignorance here in writing this. He's writing about this in retrospect, and he's sharing his own ignorance with us as a young monk. And he had been a monk by that time for already about 8 years. If he left home at 15 and he was around 23 or 24 years of age, he had already been a monk for 8 or 9 years at this point, and he's asking these kinds of questions. Now listen to this. The Tenzo laughed loudly. The Tenzo laughed loudly and said, "Oh, good fellow from a foreign country. You have not yet understood wholeheartedly engaging the way, and you do not yet know what words and phrases are." Ooh, that stung him really hard, it sounds like, right? Hearing this, I suddenly felt ashamed and stunned. And then I asked him, what are words and phrases? What is wholeheartedly engaging the way? The Tenzo said, if you do not stumble over this question, you are really a true person. That's an important phrase, to a true person, a person of the way. I could not understand at that time. The Tenzo said, if you have not yet fully gotten it, sometime later, come to Aiwang Mountain. We will have a complete dialogue concerning the principle of words and phrases. Oof. Okay, so Dogen then goes on to share more about his deepening understanding here, but there's so much in this story, and I like to point out just 3 aspects of this story that I find absolutely fascinating. The first one I kind of hinted at. This monk traveled 12 miles just to get shiitake mushrooms. And then he was going back another 12 miles. That's a full frickin' marathon just for some mushrooms. This totally flies in the face of our ordinary kind of thinking in modern Western society, where we place on the altar, on our secular altar, convenience above everything else. And this is a huge hint for us as practitioners living at home. If you want to know how to practice Zen off the cushion in your home, look at the many ways you lift up, worship convenience. And this is the exact opposite of what this story is about. It's the exact opposite. He walked a full marathon, and we don't know. It probably took him at least 6 hours to do that. And he started after lunch. He had to go back and still cook the meal. And presumably the mushrooms were dried by that time, so he'd have to soak them overnight. Was he getting any sleep? I don't know. He must have been sleeping in zazen. So, wow, 24 miles he walks. And so this kind of framing, this frames Zen practice for us. And it makes me think about all the ways in which I am guilty of doing things for the sake of convenience, and how easy it is for me and all of us really to do things based in inconvenience. We worship it. And all of our technology, thanks to these computers, the internet, and so many other things. You can get something on Amazon sometimes the very day you order it. How's that for the convenience there? Wow. And so this monk is doing the exact opposite. He didn't do this a week ahead. He did this the day that he needed it, and he walks. Okay, so that's number one thing. And just to look at our own life and think about whether convenience is really, my sense is that convenience erodes our way-seeking mind. The more a thing is convenient to us, the more easily it comes to us, the more it erodes what we call way-seeking mind, the desire for complete, perfect enlightenment. So the more we have those conveniences, my sense, this is not an empirical Dharma talk. My sense, though, is that the more we rely on convenience, the more our desire for enlightenment, our way-seeking mind gets eroded away. It gets diminished. And so you might experiment. I'm going to experiment with this too. I've been thinking about this as I practiced as the Tenzo this weekend for our session, our retreat. And I was thinking about ways in which I wish things were a little bit more convenient in the kitchen, and then thinking, no, I've got to do this. For example, I was thinking with those peanut butter balls that we had yesterday, maybe I just won't do the chocolate chips on them. It's just a hassle to get the chocolate dip on there and stuff. And then I thought about Tenzo, and I thought, he walked 12 miles just to get shiitake mushrooms. Of course I can put the chocolate on the frickin' peanut butter balls. That's the kind of thing. So it might be a small thing like that, where we just go out of our way just a little bit. It doesn't have to be 12 miles or 24. We just go out of our way just a little bit to add that sense of care to what we're doing for somebody else, in service of somebody else. This is how we do Zen practice, off of the zafu, off of the cushion. This is what Zen practice looks like off of the cushion. It's so important to think about. When I ask people, how is your practice? You can think about it in this way as the Tenzo who's serving the community. What's their mind like? They're going out of their way for people. And it's good to be around people who go out of their way for other people, because we need to see examples of this, because we don't have them, and they keep diminishing, it seems, more and more. But the more we can be around people who go out of their way for us, that's a real gift. And that's the point of the Sangha, too, to go out of our way for each other. So that's number 1 point. Number 2 point is Dogen says, Dogen is wanting, he's so happy to meet a monk, and he says, why don't you stay overnight? And any of us would be, delighted to stay overnight. Just, okay, I'll stay overnight. Yeah, I got 12 miles to cover. I don't know if I'm going to get back before midnight at this rate. But he says, I have to leave immediately after purchasing these mushrooms. So think about the intensity of that particular meeting. Like, this guy, he walked all that time. He's having this very brief conversation. Dogen's attention must have been super peaked and intense, because he's not going to see this monk. He doesn't know when he's going to see him again, if he's going to see him again. And it's so short. And the monk says, I haven't gotten permission to stay overnight. Wow, that's another thing that flies in the face of our culture. He had to get permission from somebody else in order to do what he was doing. Whereas in our culture, we put on the altar self-reliance. And you'd think an enlightened being would not need to ask anybody for permission. Wrong. Right? That's not the game. That's not what we're playing here. Enlightenment doesn't equate us with, I can do whatever I want when I want it. That's not the goal here, to get to a state of mind where you're so enlightened that you can do whatever you want whenever you want it. No, because why? It's not us, it's the whole community that we represent. We're embedded in a community. And what we do, our actions affect each other. And so, yeah, of course, to ask permission, you've got to ask. And, Jikan yesterday was talking about, you train in Japan and you're forced into positions where you have to ask for help. It's very good for us, Americans, to set ourselves in such situations where we have to rely on other people to get things, to understand what we need to do. It just reinforces this idea of interdependence. It's one thing to say it, oh yeah, we're all interdependent, but then we don't have anybody holding our feet to the fire here in this culture. We can say it, we can say that word until we're blue in the face, but we don't live it. So one way to live it is to start asking people for permission, or to tell people what you're doing. Let them know. Maybe it's your loved one at home and they're not practicing Zen and they don't know what it's about. But you can start thinking like, all right, I'm going to make this meal, for example. I'm going to ask my loved one or my family if they want this, or what would they like me to do for them? Or how you can think of the different ways of asking people for permission, not because you need them to empower you to do it. I mean, that might be part of it, but to empty yourself of your own agenda. That's what Zen is doing. We're emptying ourselves of our own agenda. It's not mine. It's what do other people want. This is a very difficult practice, and I many times I dreaded sesshin when I was in training with my teacher, because I was often put in the Tenzo position and I had to review what I wanted to make with my teacher. And she would look at it and say, well, what about this? What about that? You're not thinking about this person. You're not thinking about that person. I just want to do this. I don't need you to tell me what to do. That was going my internal dialogue. And so I had a lot of mixed feelings, as you might too, about asking somebody for permission. So I leave it to you all as a kind of experiment to think about what would happen if I asked permission. And it depends on the person you're asking from. Like how settled in themselves are they? How confident in you are they? That stuff's gonna come up, and then you have to deal with that on some level. It's an experiment. Just see what would happen if, what would happen internally for me if I asked those closest to me for permission, or if I told them what I'm doing and where I'm going. Just, what would that feel like? Just as an experiment in practice, as Zen practice. Okay. Then the third thing is the laughter of the Tenzo. And he's saying, just putting Dogen in his place. And Dogen's question, he's so sincere here. I mean, he's basically telling us how stupid he was at that time. And he's saying it as a mature practitioner. He's saying this. He's revealing his own delusion, his own delusive state in that moment, which is I'm really grateful for. And we can think about how also we can reveal our own delusive nature too. That's really, I think, an important piece of Zen practice, is the ability to share our delusions with others. That's the enlightened practice, right? It's not this talking about our great spiritual experience. That's another practice for someplace else. I spent a lot of times, I'm sorry, I love zazen, and yeah, there's great experiences in zazen of getting to another spiritual plane, but that's not enlightenment in the practice sense. Enlightenment is about sharing or expressing or communicating to other your own delusive state. Woo! Right? Sharing how you screwed up, how you are deficient, but not in a way that shames us. See, that's the thing. That's the thing, is we get ashamed of that, and we think we got to. It's not a confession in the sense of mea culpa, like getting the stick on my back or the whip. We're not shaming ourselves. It's that's an entry point into Buddhahood, that to share with others. This is what I did, and nobody's going to make us feel guilty or shameful about that. Because why? Because this is the Sangha is the pure ocean-like community. That's the other, like I mentioned last week, the Shingi. The Shingi, this is a Tenzo Kyokun. What I'm reading from is a Shingi. Shingi is an abbreviation. It means that the abbreviated term is pure rules or pure standards, but the uncontracted translation is the rules and disciplines for the pure ocean-like community. So the purity isn't about the rules. The purity is the Sangha, the ocean-like. Think about the ocean and a pure ocean. Like, think about this, not the dirty ocean, the pure ocean. How wonderful it is, that the mind that opens up when we walk towards the ocean and we see this vastness. That's the kind of feeling we want to have when we come to the Zen Center, that this is an ocean, a pure ocean. And the Sangha invites us into this pure ocean and just like vastness. We're not here to judge each other. We're not here to condemn each other. We're not here to manipulate each other. We're not here to make each other feel small. We're here to enter together to this vast spaciousness. That's foundational. And these rules and regulations are to remind us of that vast space. Oh, yeah, I'm entering in. I'm putting my palms together because, oh yeah, that reminds me of entering into, not zazen, even before you come into zazen, it's just putting the hands together. Oh, there's no separation between self and other. That's what this is. There's no separation between self and other. And then the bow. I gotta bow to that. Man, wow, there's no separation between self and other? Yes, right? Maybe we were feeling the opposite though. No separation between self. No, oh no. Shoot, right? And it could go either way. It could go either way. But here, Dogen is really revealing to us the spirit of Zen practice. Of course, zazen is important, and we just chanted a sutra about the importance of zazen. It has kind of like the foundation for everything else that comes out of Zen practice. But I want to suggest also that it's not about zazen. This Tenzo laughs in Dogen's face when he says, "You're old." He says it to Dogen, "You're old." And he means that in a very positive light. When we say you're old in the West, it's a denigration of somebody. But when Dogen in ancient China is saying you're old, it means you are worthy of veneration, right? You made it to 60 years old. You're an elder. You are old. You have gained a certain level of respect because your eyebrows are gray and your ears are long, right? And your face is wrinkled. You are old. Why do you need to be toiling with this kind of work? You should be doing zazen and studying koans. And what is it, like Americans, that's all we want to do, right? We come to Zen Center and we want to sit zazen and unpack the koans. That's what we want to do. And that's what we think Zen practice is like. Well, here we are, Dogen, 23-year-old Dogen. And I don't mean any disrespect, because I love zazen. It's my bread and butter when I wake up in the morning. It's like, oh, I want to sit zazen. Or, some of these koans are fascinating. So I don't mean to put these down at all. But the Tenzo is laughing heartily at Dogen for saying this. And I think we should hear that echo of laughter from eight centuries ago. And just let it penetrate us. We've missed the point. We've missed the point in focusing too heavily on zazen and koans. That's what I think I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. He's not saying don't do them. He's not saying don't come to the Zen Center, but you got a much bigger picture of you need a much bigger picture of what Zen practice is. Wholeheartedly engaging the way. How do you do that? Well, for the Tenzo, it's cooking for the community, cooking for cooking for serving others. And that's where we want to practice wholehearted engagement. How do we serve others? It's not about the self kind of enlightenment and the blissful feeling that we might sometimes experience briefly in zazen, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. Although the Tenzo is making his point to Dogen, and Dogen tells us, no. Where is it? I suddenly felt ashamed. I suddenly felt ashamed and stunned. That's good. That's good. And I think we should practice putting ourselves in positions of feeling ashamed and stunned as a practice. And I don't mean we should, again, it's not about denigrating ourselves. It's not about feeling ashamed for the sake of beating ourselves up. We already do that too much in a negative way. But again, listening to Jikan's talk last night and hearing him talk about the many ways that he was told what to do when he was training in Japan. And then finally just realizing that that's normal. We try at all costs to avoid being shamed and told what to do. And it's not to our benefit. But I get it. Outside of this little Zen community, that can mean something very, very different. And it can trigger us, it can trigger a trauma response in us. That's not a positive thing, and that's not the kind of responses that we want here. So we have to be very, very careful when we read something like this, and when I'm saying something about, well, we should put ourselves in a position of being shamed, because it can go really 180 degrees backwards and really make us have a distaste for Zen practice. We have to be very careful here on this point. But there's something that we are really missing when we don't see this other side of the practice of putting ourselves in a position of being corrected. And again, I don't want people now to go along and correct each other. That's not what I want anybody to do. I don't want you to go around, oh, you should have done it like this. We have to come at this from the right perspective and the right spirit. And right now, I haven't seen that come about in the United States yet. We're still really in the infancy stages of Zen practice. But going to Japan, you can really experience this in a different light, and nobody takes it personally. Is that what you found, Jikan? That people don't take it? Eventually. Thank you. Yeah. But when you see other people going through it, and it's just like par for the course. I remember just a funny story I was thinking of last night was, this was as a lay person. I was at Hoshinji Temple, and before I did the home leaving ceremony, and so I was as a lay person, and I went to the bath because I was told now is the time to go to the bath. So I went to the bath, and I opened the sliding soji screen, and there were other monks in the bath. And when they heard the screen open, they all turned their heads, 3 or 4 monks turned their head towards me. And, there was a gap between the outside world and this screen. So I wasn't opening it up on the outside. It was like a vestibule area. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm just entering, it's my turn to go to the bath. I wasn't thinking about them at all, just that I knew they were there. And one of the monks there looked at me sternly, and he said in Japanese, "Shitsurei ne," which means, you're supposed to say, "Excuse me, aren't you?" Or something like that when you enter a space. And I was like, yeah, good. I knew that much Japanese. And when you say "Shitsurei shimasu," that's a phrase in Japanese you say frequently. "Shitsurei shimasu." It means, I apologize for being here. Something like that. But it's not a denigration of yourself in the way that we would do it in the West. It doesn't mean I don't belong. In fact, when you say it, it means you are so grounded in your belonging that you can say that. Because you're so grounded in your belonging, you can say, "I'm sorry for being here." That's Zen, right? That paradox. "I'm sorry for being here. Please excuse me." And so then okay, shitsurei shimasu. And I bowed a little bit, and then they turned around and they continued with their thing. But that was the practice, because it's not about me personally. It's about how are we in relationship. That was a shingi. I was taught right there. When you enter a room where there's seniors, you make yourself known in a humble way. All right, that's a shingi. And that has a lot of practical applications for us, even if in our society we prize equality and democracy. When we go to Japan, hierarchy is the norm, and especially in a Zen temple, hierarchy is really explicitly demonstrated. In our culture, though, too, I want to suggest hierarchy is there. It's just very well muted. We mute it as much as possible. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know. Because I don't see hierarchy there's a lot of bad reasons why we like to equalize everything in our culture. It's often because of the abuses of power that we see in hierarchy, which are real, and we do have to be careful about. And those abuses exist in Zen temples as well. So I don't want to paint a picture of perfection here, and that's the way to go. But there is something very beneficial to us recognizing where hierarchy is in our own country. For example, in our workplaces, and how our relationships can go better when we recognize and acknowledge, even in a very subtle way, the hierarchical relationships that we work in and with. And this is, of course, not meaning that we should accept abuses of those powers. But for example, when I work at the hospital as a chaplain, I'm a newbie in that position. I've only been there a year. I'm working with another chaplain who, by all ways of thinking, we're equals. And in a sense, we are. In fact, all of us are equals, whether you've been practicing for 20 years or just this is your first day. We're all equals. We're all Buddhas. But there's something to be said about recognizing that somebody's been doing something a little bit longer. And so this other chaplain I work with, she's a Christian minister. She's been there for over 15 years. And so she knows something more than I do. Not only that, but there's people there that aren't chaplains that have been working there for 40 years. There's a woman that I'm working under that has been there for 40 years and is getting ready to retire. So I want to make myself, as part of my practice, I want to bring myself down. I'm not looking at them as my equals. I'm looking at them as my teachers. And again, of course, we don't want to invite abuses of power, but there's something really powerful when we can see others as our teachers, if they've been there long, even if you know more than they do. Right? There are Zen practitioners from America that know more about the Dharma than some of the Japanese, but they don't understand it. They don't know how to practice it. And so even though some of the Americans, they go to Japan, they've got to do that too. They might have read more, they might understand more, but they don't know how to practice in relationship to others. So they might be working with a monk that's really naive about the Dharma, that doesn't like to do zazen, for example, doesn't want to be there, and yet there's a relationship that needs to be honored. And so at your workplace, maybe your coworker doesn't like themselves. They don't like their job. They've been there forever. They don't see meaning or purpose in what they're doing. And yet here you are, right? And you think that what you're doing is part of the integral process of the universe and Buddha activity, and you're there to enlighten other people. All right, well, how do you relate to somebody who's been there for much longer? You humble yourself to them, and I don't mean like how you do that is you're gonna have to figure that out yourself, right? Because we don't have the forms to do it. We don't have the forms to do it easily here in this country, and it makes our relationships very awkward and wonky. But we need to know how to. We need to recognize, this person, they've been here longer. I got to respect them, and maybe they hate their job and stuff, but still, I got to find a way to connect with this person. Maybe it means I got to share my own stuff that I hate about this job, even though I know it's Buddha activity at the center, right? Or something. I don't know. I'm not you. You got to figure it out, right? You got to figure this out. In Japan, and in a Zen temple, it's much easier. You just bring your palms together and you bow, or you say shitsure shimasu, or something, and there's an acknowledgement there, and then the relationship naturally goes smoother. We have to do something a little different here. We can't do it like that, right? But we can learn from these different forms and this Tenzo Dogen interaction there about how to understand what Zen practice is, because it's much more than just sitting on the cushion doing zazen. Thank you.